How are
Everyone
you?
say hello. Say a big hello. Can you see this crowd? Okay, great, great. I mean, I know we've been doing this for 18 plus months and even before that, but it still continues to amaze me that this works and happens. So thank you guys. I'm just, I'll introduce you really quickly just to say, we're really glad to be here. We just finished watching, all three of these beautiful shorts, Darine. We've got Darine Hotait, the director, Michelle Baroody, who's the curator of the Mizna Film Festival. She's worked on that a long time there and helped us out here. So we're really, really happy to have you two. We've had a really wonderful time. I thought I'd let you just, spend some time talking to each other before we make sure we have time to take questions. So we'll just kind of, be watching our time together, but please feel free to introduce yourselves or, take it away.
I'm Michelle, the curator.
Hi, I'm Darine, the filmmaker.
I had the privilege of, programming Darine's films and being in conversation with her before. So this is super exciting to be able to do this again. We're both sad to not be there with you. It looks like an incredible theater. It's really fun to be able to see the crowd. I thought that I would just start with a question for you that maybe gives the audience and also me some insight into just how did you get into filmmaking? Maybe just because I think your project Cinephilia Bound at Cannes is so interesting. How is your own practice connected to that project? And can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure. Well, hi, Michelle. Hi, everyone in the room. Thank you so much for joining me on a Sunday afternoon. I'm really happy to be here. I wish I was there with you, but I'm still here with you. So to answer your question, Michelle, how I started with filmmaking, I actually started from like storytelling. That was my first intrigue in film, because I was first writing short stories and poetry, and I didn't really know that I wanted to be a filmmaker. Like I was not attracted to cinema like that growing up, but because I wasn't really watching a lot of movies. I was born in Beirut during the Civil War, and like we did not have like a lot of access to things. But there was this video, a cassette shop down the street, something like what Blockbuster used to be at the time, but like a mini version of it in our little neighborhood in Beirut. And my brother would like rent these tapes of Bruce Lee films. So I was watching this stuff. No, I was not really introduced to anything else at that time until later. But my intrigue into cinema came from actually my practice of lucid dreaming. I practiced lucid dreaming, and through that practice, I realized that I had such a good grasp of my like visual interpretation of things or situations. And when every time I'm having a lucid dream, I'm like reinterpreting certain events or certain things that I've lived in a totally different manner, and just like injecting into it a lot of things that could have happened or I would have wanted to happen in a certain way. And just I took all of that and I realized that okay, that just merging these words together, I don't know how, just like came to me like, ding, cinema, make movies. And I just went to film school and I studied film as a screenwriter and film director. And I've been just making films since. Regarding Bound, so I run an incubator company, and it's a production company and also a talent incubator called Cinephilia Productions. It's based here in New York, and it's been running for about 10 years. And its mission is to champion the next generation of Arab and African filmmakers and storytellers. So one of these programs is the program that we do at the Cannes Film Festival every year, where we select projects by Arab and African filmmakers, feature films, documentary and narrative, and we bring the filmmakers to Cannes to the market to pitch their films and to introduce them to industry professionals. And actually, I find that every time I meet new filmmakers, I just, it kind of refreshes in me something about my relationship with this art form and why am I telling stories and why do I want to do this. It's a struggle to make films, as we all know, and just like even more of a struggle to like keep doing films. But then when you meet, you know, new filmmakers and you just get with them on this journey of making their film happen, it just refreshes something in me that I want to keep doing this. Like there's a bigger purpose with what we do. So that's kind of like the link between me being a filmmaker and being part of other filmmakers to develop their work.
That's amazing. I'm so intrigued by all of the things you just said and want to like think through this lucid dreaming. In some ways, it makes a lot of sense when you were saying that, because I do feel like there is something dreamlike in all three of these films that the audience just watched. You know, maybe less clear in Tallahassee, but definitely in I Say Dust, and definitely there in Like Salt. And last time you and I talked, we talked a lot about I Say Dust and Tallahassee, and sort of thinking about the inspiration for both of those films. And I know I Say Dust was based, you know, of the inspiration you said, which I love this story. You heard Hela's poem and sort of built the film around it. And the Tallahassee was also Hela's script that she had been working on, and the two of you are you know, often collaborating on projects, which is great for all of us getting to see your films. But maybe just for the audience's sake, it'd be really nice to hear what brought you to each of these three very different stories, expanding a little bit on I Say Dust and Tallahassee. And I would just love to hear more about Like Salt. We've never talked a lot about that one.
That's right. We actually never talked about Like Salt, you and I. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for programming all three films in previous festivals. We never had the chance to talk about that. Well, I say that's like you said, it started with me meeting Hala Alian. Hala was giving a poetry reading here in New York, and I never heard of Hala before until that day. And that was back in 2014. And the moment I saw her perform, just it really moved me so much. The way she was delivering the poetry, the emotion behind it, I just like was moved in ways that I never thought I existed in me. And I just knew like I wanna create with this person. There's something there. I want this person to be part of my journey. And we talked, and I asked Hala to send me 3 of her poems, 3 of the poems that she really likes. And she sent me 3, and I chose Valentine, which is the poem that we see in I Say Dust. And I was at the time already like writing something that takes place in a chess store, because I love, it really started from my love to chess. I play chess, and like I know this amazing place that I just want to glorify in movies. And it's run by a Palestinian American, amazing, wonderful human being called Imad. And he has one of the oldest chess spaces in New York called the Chess Forum. So when I visited Imad and then I met Hala, I'm like, oh, it's all coming together. Like something is just like, everything's coming together for a story to be told. And from the poem, I started to rework, like to rework the story, the script. And I like just, you know, made the poetry as like the centerpiece in the film and built the narrative around it. And that's how like I Say Dust kind of happened. I always say it's like an adaptation of a poem to a movie, but without it being an experimental film. It's actually a narrative film, but there was always this feeling that, you know, we're experimenting with the narrative through poetry. So that's how, you know, that's how I did I Say Dust. And when couple of years later, Hala tells me, I want to write something for film. I'm like, sure, please go for it, write a movie. So she wrote Tallahassee, and I read the script, and I was completely in love with the world that she created in the script. And we started working together to make it more, you know, to integrate more visual storytelling. Hala comes from literature, novel, and poetry writing, so we kind of worked together to make it into like an actual visual experience. And Tallahassee happened. So that was our second collaboration together, and I'm hoping for more to come. As for Like Salt, what was exactly the question about Like Salt?
I would just love to hear a little bit like where did that film come from? Because I feel like we, you know, just for context for the audience, Darine and Hala and I had a conversation at the last Mizna Festival in Minneapolis virtually about their collaboration. So I feel like we've had a lot of time to think of, like, I've heard so much about that collaboration, but I would just what inspired Like Salt? I just want to hear more about that process and where that story came from.
Yeah, you know, Like Salt is one of the most personal films to me. When I was making it, it was a story that I've been wanting to tell since 2006, when there was a war happened in Lebanon the summer of 2006, and it's kind of like stayed with me. It impacted me so much. I was at the time living in Los Angeles, and I had some family members visiting Lebanon over the summer, and they got stuck there in like a very bad situation, and it's really, you know, kind of resurfaced all my childhood trauma related to war, and just like the fact that like existing is not something that we own. So I just I was very challenged with those emotions, and I thought at the time that I kind of like liberated myself from certain things, but then I realized that actually not. They're like, they are there because I've been avoiding them, and I was like, okay, the only way for me to deal with this is to go through it, and I would only go through it through what I know best, which is making films. And I wrote Like Salt about that time where I was existing here, but I was not here. Like mentally, emotionally, nothing of me was in the place where I was existing physically. All my thoughts were like back home with my family, like being challenged with also a very challenging relationship with family members, that I wanted to talk to them, but I wasn't sure if this is the right time. So a lot of it was kind of very personal. And I wanted to just create a world that feels like we're avoiding, but we can't avoid anymore. Like it's right here sitting in front of us, and we need to address this feeling of alienation, of being in a place where probably most of the people around you don't even know what you're going through because there's no reference. So that's kind of how Like Salt came to be.
Thanks. It's beautiful. I really love that film. It was really fun to rewatch. I know, just thinking of time, are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, sure. We could go to that. Thanks. So many things you said, you know, were just really interesting, and that lucid dreaming is something I think I'll be thinking about for a long time too. Does anyone have a question? I think for ease, this has a chord. We could just ask you to kind of say it out loud, and I'll repeat it to them so they can really understand what you're asking. Feel free to, you know, ask questions, make comments. Tell us more about the lady boxer.
Okay. The lady boxer. So in Like Salt, the protagonist, her name is Hala, and she's not a professional boxer. She is, you know, she kind of uses boxing as a means to express her anger, to take her anger out. And I thought that was a layer to the character that can lead us to the point where she actually does use that skill to punch someone in the face. And I wanted to establish that she was angry, and her anger was just living with her, and the only way she was getting that anger out is just by with a punching bag, because she's been like punched in the face so many times, and she'd never got a chance to get it out. So that's how I thought about actually making her a boxer to begin with, because we never really know what she does, who she is. We know nothing about her. She's a stranger to us and everyone around her. So I wanted us just to have one element that bring us a little bit closer to her, where she is in her mental space.
Thank you. Go ahead. Wow. You know, fiction and film. It intrigued me. I wonder if you're aware of that. Was it intentional? Let me try to paraphrase. Darine, I don't know if you heard that fully.
No, sorry.
A question wondering about the recurrence of feathers and balloons. the evil eye. The question also, the question also kind of was talking about associations with the unbearable lightness of being. And what was the end of your comment? Does that sound good? Did I capture that well? The intentionality of some of those elements.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. Actually, I think it's a great that like you kind of talking about one symbol from each film, because I do work a lot with like the symbolism of elements that I use in movies. So talking about feathers, I love that you referenced the unbearable lightness of pain. I think when I was thinking about the character, as I said before, like I didn't want us to know anything about her, but through the things that she, like little things she does and the very few words that she says and what she wears. I was working with my costume designer. I wanted to, just thinking about someone like Hala, what would she wear? I wanted something that felt like she's larger than her size. She's larger than the space that she exists in. But at the same time, I wanted her to have this space where you can't come near her. Like if she moves, or you can't really, there's social distancing. Now that we're living in this world, she's social distancing herself from the people around her by creating this larger than life existence on when she's with people. It's not common that like you just find somebody walking in the street with feathers, but we established that she's just someone who's just being herself, and she doesn't really mind doing whatever she wants to do. She expresses her freedom through that. And the idea of feathers came from the fact that I wanted that feeling of lightness, of her feeling like she can fly if she just lets herself release this anger that she has inside of her. She's ready to fly. She's ready to take off. And that was, that's what we see at the end of the film, where she starts actually asking questions. Before that, she was not asking questions. And the first question she asks in the film is, "Where are we going?" And that means she's ready now to fly, and she's ready to let go, to go to the next place in her life. If that answers your question. Oh, for the balloons, I just love balloons. No, that's not my answer. The balloons was the hardest part of the film, to be very honest with you. I never thought that balloons would be so hard to direct, because they're like, they have their life on their own and you can't do anything about it. So the balloons was something that me and Hala, the writer of the film, we decided to have this element of, where that just gives the feeling of lightness again, and also it gives the feeling of happiness, of like some sort of like like partying in a way. Like I wanted us to feel like there's this very sad person who has to carry an element of happiness around while she's trying to express her sadness. So the balloon kind of became part of her character from the beginning of the film, as she had to take care of those balloons while she wasn't even able to take care of herself. And then she had to deal with a boy who had a balloon that he was so attached to. It is only one balloon. He didn't need many balloons to be happy. He needed just one balloon that he was attached to, but he was able to let go of that balloon later on without even just like looking back at it. Like, it's okay, I can get another one. So just like that balloon element was kind of a tie in between the two characters that actually, once they come together, they change each other. Hala changes something in Rakan, and Rakan changes something in Hala, and Mira. Sorry, I keep saying Hala because she's Hala to me, the character of Mira. So that element that just, they both have that element with them, but it functions differently in each one of their journey.
Thanks, Darine. There's a couple more hands, and I just want to say, there are a lot of people here that you can't see. There's a few rows where the majority of the people are sitting. So
hello, everyone.
We're all attentive. Yeah, just wanted to let you know that. Yeah, back there.
then also the fact that she went together with an African American man. I felt like, especially in today's time, those sort of topics with Americans, we don't really, or like, we don't discuss it. It's something that's taboo to even talk about. And it's the fact that it ended so tensely, and she was eating salt, and it was that salty taste in your mouth at the end to the point where no one clapped until it was like, it was kind of awkward to stop clapping, you know? I thought that was genius. I just wanted to tell you that. I thought it was really dope.
I'm really sorry I didn't have this mic in your hand for that. Darine, I don't know if you heard any of that, but oh,
No, but I can feel the energy.
it was a real. I mean, I guess I could, if I could just try to paraphrase. I know. Sorry about that. It was a really beautiful kind of reflection on like racial tensions and tones in Like Salt and the ways that we were kind of maybe reacting and sort of almost holding our breath. If you want to just give her a little bit of what you said, and we can see what she might have to say.
Sorry, I was just saying that I thought that the intent behind the second one, because I was saying we clapped at the very end of the first short film as soon as the credits started rolling. The third one we clapped at the very end as soon as the credits started rolling. But the second film, it ended so tensely, or so like tension, like it wasn't complete, and also all the race issues that were brought up with the wearing the Native American headdress, and that's like very offensive in today's standard, because it's like the whole Halloween and like people wearing stuff that's not a part of their culture as for fun, as something they can take off later, where we can't take off our blackness, we can't take off our indigenous, you know what I mean? And the cop putting his hand on his holster, trying to scare him and just walking off, and then her also maybe being romantically involved with this man, and he's a black man. And the way that it ended, it was incomplete, and like no one clapped until like the very end, almost like as like, oh, we should probably clap because it's awkward. We clapped for the first one. Okay, let's clap then now because it's done. But it was so tense, and I think it's because of our society today as Americans. We don't talk about these things. We still have these issues, even years later after all this stuff has happened. And I think it's because we don't talk about it that it's like, I don't know if that was your intention to maybe make us feel tense at the end of that one, and maybe not so willing to applaud, but I just thought it was genius the way you did that. And the salt that she was eating and the salty taste that kind of left in our minds, like, oh my God, that's not really satisfying. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just thought it was cool.
Would you respond
Thank you
to that,
so
Darine?
much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very moved by what you said, and I'm actually really happy that no one clapped, because that's like for me, I feel that I want the audience to leave with questions, not answers, because this film is not about answering any questions. It's really about asking questions that we have to find answers for, and just like confronting the questions, the big questions that we are living in every day, and not having answers for. These answers are to be created, not just to be found. They're not like in front of it. We need to create those answers, and I wanted Like Salt to have that feeling. I love the fact, like the fact that you said about like it leaves like this salty feeling. So that's what the whole film is about, those feelings that are very uncomfortable. And being uncomfortable is I believe is a great feeling, because it just like triggers us to move towards a different place, and just like getting out of the discomfort by talking about certain things that, whether we talk about usually or not, just framing them in a way that can make us uncomfortable yet again, it means they are still not comfortable enough to be present, or like to be in front of us. So I really love the fact that you kind of connected all of these things together. And I think a big part of Like Salt is the journey of this Arab woman and this Black man coming together, and both of them feeling alienated in a place that they're supposed to call home, but they can't really call it home, because is it really home? And what is really home? When do we know that this is home, and how can we make ourselves feel at home? So they come together with all their cultural differences, but they come together in their alienation, in the way they perceive their own existence in a place like this. And I feel like once they get together and they open up to each other, a whole new world just opens up for both of them, and they start existing within each other's world, instead of being on their own. So there's also this coming together that just makes things a little, that's where like the romantic part came in. That's where we start feeling there's some love there, when they kind of came together and accepted each other with all the differences that's between them, and all the, you know, the tension that just happened, and they were just being involved with each other like they are total strangers. And that's something I really love to explore, is just having just two total strangers come together and just change each other's lives, by just feeling that there's one thing maybe that bring them together. And there's always something that, if we look closely, we find that there's one thing that bring us together, if not two or three, but just we have to look closely at it. So with all our differences, there's always this one thing that can bring us together, and we gotta find it. What is it? That's what like SALT kind of ends, like the question that it, you know, puts on the table. What is it? And once we know it, we can start living within that space. We create another space.
Michelle, would you want to say anything about like SALT? I know you were kind of gripped by that too, of course. And, you know, here you are with us, you know, maybe you, if you know, or jump in at any time, but I thought I would just ask you.
I don't want to, I mean, I want to definitely have everyone hear from Darine, as these are her films. But one thing that, and I love that question too, and that was something that just linking that encounter to the other two films was something that, upon rewatching all three of these together, unfortunately not in the theater with all of you, just that there is this element in each film where there is an encounter between strangers, that these, you know, and even though Mira and Rakan are family, you know, they don't really know each other, and there's something about that encounter that seems really important to each film. And your response, like the audience members' comments and your response to it really brought out for me something that I was looking for and thinking about upon rewatching, you know, like what is it about these kinds of encounters? And just what you were saying about like SALT, I think applies to the other two films as well, that there's a way in which we can create a different world by sort of recognizing and seeing in others this something that maybe we would go unnoticed, that we might miss through all of the noise, all of the things that try to keep us separate. So I think that was just a really beautiful response, and it sort of helped me to think about that question I had for you. But I would love to hear audience questions.
Yeah, me too. I would just want to say too that, you know, to me, the idea that you could create a different world through communing with strangers instead of your homogeneous community is a really radical idea, actually. Of course, there are overlaps between who you're going to connect with, but that's a really interesting concept. So I appreciate that. Go ahead, and then I'll go over here. Please, go ahead.
I noticed stylistically and visually she used a lot of close-ups. I just want her to elaborate more on why was everything so.
Darine, close-ups. What was the stylistic kind of interest in so much close-ups in the works that you showed?
Thank you so much for that question. I always love cinematography questions, because I do put a lot of thought into cinematography and to choosing what to put in the frame, because that's where it all starts. Like, what do you focus on in your frame? Close-ups, because I love my characters so much, and I love to be inside their head and just so close to them, even though they, like, let's say like for Mira and Tallahassee, she's like so estranged to everything around her, but I wanted us to feel like we know her, we're with her, we're emotionally with her. And I love working with close-ups when it comes to building tension and emotional evolution of the character. So the more we get to know her, the closer we get, the tighter the shots get. That's kind of like where how I think of building my shots, is to start looking at the emotional arc of the character. Where do we meet them? Who are they when we meet them? How much do we know about them when we meet them? And how close do we want to get to them? And when we do get close, what do we know now about them? So that's kind of like my intrigue in close-ups, is always goes into that arc and when to start choosing to make the shots get really tight. But I try to avoid like suffocating shots with like close-ups. So I mostly use them with faces, not with objects or landscapes. I really use them more with characters. So yeah, that's how I think of close-up shots.
Thank you. Do you want to? Yeah, please. Would you like to make it here? I'd be happy to paraphrase. Thank you. It sounded like you really there's going to be a lot there, so I. Okay. There you go.
So I had a question about Tallahassee. I noticed that you breached a little bit the topic of mental health in the Arab community and how that was not really kindly looked upon. And so the question is whether whether that was meant, was it intentional, and whether you had any plans for something more elaborate in breaching the topic of mental health in the Middle Eastern Arab community and how they look at that. And because that's been always not a problem, but it's just something that's taboo, that we don't talk about, like, oh no, she wasn't sick, she was. And it's interesting that Tallahassee is in the middle of Florida, which is locked in, which is similar to where she was locked into a hospital. And it's an interesting kind of similarity with her own mental illness, that the place that she was in was inland and it was inside her, and then the only way she could get out of it was by imagining mermaids and unrealistic things that would liberate her mind and get her out of it. And then it's interesting that she tried to get the bracelet off, but she couldn't do it herself. But then a kid helped her liberate herself from that. And that, I thought that was interesting. But the whole idea of mental health I think that's maybe deserves a little bit more down the road, if you have any plans for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also thank you for coming down the stairs to speak in the mic. Thank you so much. Well, I totally agree with you. We definitely need to talk more about mental health. In Tallahassee specifically, the writer Hala and myself, we wanted to kind of treat it just like how we actually treat it in our culture, so we can see our own reflection and ask ourselves this particular question, like, why don't we talk about it more? And the absence of it in the film, or we feel is absent, is intentional. We wanted to treat it as is the same way we treat it actually in our families, where we actually just don't talk about it and we totally avoid it. So that avoidance was intentional. We didn't want to avoid putting that in the forefront of every single moment in the film, and just to keep it just in the a little bit in the background, but we kind of get to understand what's going on through Mira, through her own transformation, instead of like having a talk about it. So it only comes out in places where like there's no other way but to talk about it, when we're forced to talk about it, instead of it being just being a normal thing to do, just to talk about it. No, it had to be forced. It had to be a disaster for it to become a conversation, to exist in between the two sisters when they talk. There is a plan to make a feature film of Tallahassee. Right now, Hala and I we're working on it. Hala's writing the script of the feature, and we're planning for it for next year. And in the feature, we're going to explore more the dynamics of families in the context of mental health. We're still going to work with it authentically, with like the avoidance that we see, but there will be more elaborate approach to because it will allow us, the format will allow us to do that, since it's going to be a feature film, to go more into a little more details on that.
Thank you. You must have had some inside information or something, I think.
I was gonna how did you know? Okay.
Thank you for that answer. I'd like to take just a couple more questions. I know there were hands, they've gone down. Ahimsa, I'd be happy to, yeah, you'd like to come down, great.
Thank you. Really, thank you, everyone.
Shakan, this was so lovely. And for me, as someone from the South Bronx, from New York, really just appreciative of the very intersectional work that you're doing, like in these intimacies, like in the first film, I Say Dust, like to see these ways in which, like throughout all three of the films actually, but starting with that one, how these characters, how they know themselves is also how they are seen by others and how they know others, and how like there's so much precarity in your films, like so much like survival and danger and intimacy. And I just want to say, like, in terms of the way in which you weave gender, sexuality, race, and class and mental health is just really beautiful. And as someone who grew up in New York City from a very multi-generational family, I think it's some of the most complex work I've seen of our communities. And I'm not sure if there's really a question except to say thank you for all of this, because it's so rare when we see our lives portrayed so complexly. And I guess what I'd ask is, like, were there particular hungers in you for certain types of representation that led you to pursue either certain aesthetics or narratives, or and or what is the things that still hunger within you for representations or investigations that don't exist quite yet in terms of the complex lives that we live nowadays? So just thank you so much.
Thank you. That really, I'm very moved by that. Thank you so much. I'd say, like, I don't think of representation as like a number one thing when I'm creating. I really think of what story do I want to tell? What story can come out of me that can be authentic, that I know how to create that world for. And just it starts really from there. And I think probably now when I look at all my films, these three films and the films before that, I start seeing like evolution of certain narratives, and realizing that there's something that really interests me. Sometimes from the outside, just to give you an insight on an artist like process, we just don't know sometimes what we're talking about. There's a point where we just like put it out there, and then we start knowing what are we talking about. In that process comes the the personal reflection and the evolution of our voice as artists. I would talk about my own process, like that's how what happens with me. I just start telling a story, and then I ask myself, why am I telling this story now, and why do I think that I'm the right person to tell this story? Am I the right person to tell this story? And once I find answers for these questions that really kind of attach me to the story that I'm telling, I feel like I'm owning it more and more and more. And and then I look back at all my work, I start seeing sometimes repetition, sometimes themes that I have explored, but not enough, that now I want to talk about more, and just like, go more in depth and detail about it. But in my case, I've been like very much like personal in my films. Every single film I've made has been, there's a personal story behind it, which kind of makes me know the story more, and just like know why I want to tell it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there's so much in the process that's personal, and these stories just come from a place that is within. So I don't think like I'm now representing something. I just think that I'm representing myself in my films, and I'm just being my own reflection of the world that I know and that I'm living in. How it's interpreted on the outside, that's when it stops being my job. And it's now it's for the audience, and they decide what to do with it and how to feel about it. But it always moves me when I think that there's someone out there who's looking at this work and they feel like, oh, it's me. Like I see myself in this film. That really impacts my work a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for that.
There's something too, just adding on to that, because I love that question and your response. Just thinking, what's so incredible about your films is something that at Mizna, when we're thinking about programming for our communities, that we think about a lot, right? This idea of representing. How do we represent Arabness in some authentic way? You know, what are those questions? What does that even mean? And, you know, I think that like the reason that your characters feel so complex is something that you've said, just this, there's a way that you don't allow access. The audience doesn't get to know everything. And in some ways that resists a kind of gaze that you understand, or maybe unconsciously or consciously know that will come to your film, like the audience that will be engaging with your work, that there's a way in which we don't get to really, as an audience, as a spectator, see or like understand every single thing about this character, which leaves them really complex, which in some ways resists that idea of like, you know, this film must represent the experience of being Arab American. And that's just something that I think is really wonderful about your work.
Yeah, I definitely totally echo that, Michelle. I mean, representation is such a red herring in some ways. You know, I feel like the ways that you talked about that, Darine, you know, that honesty, you know, it kind of finds its way back around to the most powerful maybe forms of representation, because you're representing yourself. And, you know, that's such a challenge for this kind of work, for the parameters of like what Mizna, I think, works with and all of its artists that it, you know, comes into contact with. So that's a really just a wonderful and complex idea. It's 4 o'clock. Maybe I'll just take one more here. I see Caleb. Yeah. Question about jazz music, maybe why, your interest in it. Yeah, you know, what's the beautiful way to end thinking about jazz music?
I'm obsessed with music and obsessed with jazz, which I call it Black American music for a better term. It's a music that really moves me a lot, and just the aspect of improvisation is just so real to me that I feel like I'm really close to this artist, and they're like telling me something right now and then. It's just like this raw feeling of jazz, just something that really has an impact on me. I love improvisation in general, but particularly in Black American music, and that's my intrigue in it. And I always find myself in my films going towards jazz because of that reason. I feel like it complements the worlds that I build that have a lot of improvisation in them, whether like in I Say Dust, whether in like Salt, or even Tallahassee when they're walking in the street. I wanted to have a tribute for Ahmad Jamal, who's my favorite pianist of all time, and we scored that track with Ahmad Jamal in mind. Same with like Salt, with the world of jazz and underground of New York, and where it all really happens, that energy when musicians come together and improvise and speak to each other. It's a language. It's a language that, whether you know it or not, it speaks to you. And that's what I love about it. It's so brilliant.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Darine. Thank you, everyone here. I'm seeing a lot of desperate hands, feeling like
I just want to say that I am accessible.
I'm sorry.
I just want to say, if anyone has more questions and we're running out of time, please feel free to get in touch with me. I can share, like, my information is on my website. You can get in touch with me anytime.
Is that? Okay, Darine, she needs to call her dad. Okay, she needs to call her dad.
I need to call my dad, or
no. Hella's character. Hella's character in the second film. Okay.
Yes, she did call her dad.
Lots of questions.
She did call her dad. He wasn't very grateful about it.
Yeah, all right. Now we're starting to kind of come apart. Okay. I will say thank you again so much, Michelle, Darine, everyone here. Very wonderful to have you. And you're very accessible. If anybody has a burning question, contact Darine Hotait. Stick around for this reception and then 1982. And just, yeah, thank you all again.
Thank you so much. And 1982 is a brilliant movie. Please watch it. And I just want to say thank you so much to Moheb, to you, to everyone at Mizna, to Michelle, to the audience, to the Tulsa Artist Fellowship, everyone who was involved in making this happen. Thank you so much for having me.
Beautiful.
And see you next time.
Yeah. See you next time. Bye, Michelle. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.